Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
For decades, one mountain in Saudi Arabia was sealed behind armed guards and barbed wire and absolute silence. Anyone who tried to reach it was arrested. The entire region was erased from scientific curiosity as if it never existed. Then, in 2025, a single drone flew overhead carrying technology that could see through solid rock. What it found beneath the surface made an entire research team go silent. And now we finally understand why they never wanted anyone to know what was buried there. The Forbidden Mountain. 4 miles from a peak called Jabal al-Lawz in northwestern Saudi Arabia, there is an ancient graveyard. Japanese archaeologists are currently excavating this site, and what they are finding has sent shockwaves through the academic world. Some researchers believe this could be the burial ground where approximately 3,000 Israelites were killed and buried after they committed the sin of worshipping the golden calf. But here is what makes this discovery truly extraordinary. The Saudi government did not want anyone to find this place. For decades, they surrounded the entire region with 15-foot chain-link fences topped with razor wire. They posted signs in Arabic and English warning that trespassers would face severe penalties. They built military installations on the summit and stationed armed patrols along every approach road. Jabal al-Lawz rises to an elevation of 2,580 meters, making it the tallest peak in all of northern Arabia. Its coordinates place it at 28 degrees, 39 minutes north latitude and 35 degrees, 18 minutes east longitude. This location sits squarely within the ancient land of Midian, which is exactly where the Bible says Moses spent 40 years of his life before encountering the burning bush. The local Bedouin tribes have called this place the Mountain of Moses for as long as anyone can remember. They call the surrounding valley Wadi Musa, which translates to Valley of Moses. These are not names that tourists invented. These are names that have been passed down through countless generations of people who have lived in this landscape since the time of the pharaohs. In 1984, a man named Ron Wyatt attempted to reach this mountain. He was a nurse anesthetist from Nashville, Tennessee, who had spent years studying the potential location of biblical sites. After 4 years of denied visa applications, Wyatt and his 2 sons entered Saudi Arabia through unofficial channels. They reached Jabal al-Lawz and managed to film what they saw on an 8mm camera before Saudi authorities arrested them. The Saudis charged them as Israeli spies and threw them into prison for 78 days. They confiscated every piece of film and documentation. When Wyatt finally returned to the United States, he appeared on CBS Morning News, but he had no physical evidence left to show the world. 4 years later, 2 Americans named Bob Cornuke and Larry Williams decided to try again. Cornuke was a former Los Angeles SWAT team member with FBI training. Williams was a Wall Street millionaire who had twice run for Senate in Montana. They entered Saudi Arabia at night and traveled through the desert disguised to avoid detection. At one point, they became completely lost. They encountered a Bedouin shepherd and asked him about Jabal al-Lawz. The shepherd pointed toward the mountain and spoke 2 words that changed everything. He called it Jabal Musa, Mountain of Moses. Cornuke and Williams dug under the security fence at night. They documented everything they could find, including a blackened summit that looked like it had been subjected to intense fire and ancient rock carvings, depicting people bowing before images of cattle. They photographed stone structures and boundary markers before escaping back across the border. Their photographs were turned over to Harvard University for analysis. Journalist Howard Blum documented their entire adventure in a 1998 book called The Gold of Exodus. But still, the mountain remained closed. Still, the Saudi government refused to let anyone conduct a proper scientific investigation. Then, in 2025, everything changed. What the radar revealed. A private research team negotiated an agreement with Saudi officials. The terms were simple: just one drone carrying a piece of technology that would change our understanding of biblical history forever. The device was a phased array, ground-penetrating radar system. This is the same technology that military organizations use to locate underground bunkers and buried weapons caches. It works by sending electromagnetic waves into the earth and analyzing the signals that bounce back from subsurface structures. Modern systems can penetrate more than 30 meters of solid rock and create detailed 3-dimensional maps of whatever lies beneath. The team programmed a precise flight path over Jabal al-Lawz. They launched the drone and waited for the data to stream back to their monitors. What appeared on their screens made every person in that room stop breathing. The radar detected structures beneath the mountain, not natural caves, not geological fissures, man-made structures with walls meeting at perfect 90-degree angles. The scans revealed rectangular chambers arranged in precise grid patterns. Corridors connected rooms in layouts that looked planned and deliberate and architectural. Here is something you need to understand about geology. Nature does not create right angles. Erosion produces curves and smooth surfaces. Tectonic activity creates chaos and random fractures. But the scans showed order. They showed the kind of precise geometric organization that only comes from intelligent construction. The depth readings placed these chambers approximately 40 feet below the current surface. They had been buried by millennia of landslides and flash floods and the slow accumulation of desert sand, sealed away, preserved in the dry desert air, waiting for technology advanced enough to find them. But the truly shocking discovery was the scale of what lay beneath. This was not a small shelter or a single storage room. The radar detected a network of interconnected chambers spanning more than 300 feet in total length. If you laid this complex out on the surface, you would be looking at something roughly the size of an American football field. That is large enough to hold thousands of people. That is large enough to match the biblical description of 600,000 men, plus women and children, gathering at the base of the mountain of God. The research team ran the scans 3 more times. They checked for interference from the military radar installations on the summit. They recalibrated every sensor and verified every data point. The results held firm every single time. Something massive is buried beneath that mountain, and based on the depth and preservation state of these structures, they have been there for thousands of years. The 1500-year misdirection. For more than 15 centuries, millions of Christian pilgrims have traveled to a mountain in Egypt called Jabal Musa. There is a famous monastery at its base called St. Catherine's, which was built in the 6th century by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. Tourists climb those ancient stone steps every single day, believing with absolute certainty that they are walking in the footsteps of Moses. But what if they have been climbing the wrong mountain this entire time? The Bible describes Mount Sinai as a place of supernatural fire and smoke. When God descended upon the peak, the entire mountain burned with flames. The ground shook so violently that the people trembled with fear. Smoke rose into the sky like the smoke of a great furnace. The whole summit was engulfed in what can only be described as volcanic fury. Now look at Jabal Musa in Egypt. Geologists have surveyed every inch of that mountain. It is composed of solid, stable granite that formed between 870 and 550 million years ago. There is no evidence of volcanic activity anywhere on the peak. There is no scorched rock. There is no thermal damage. There is nothing whatsoever that could explain the cataclysmic events described in the book of Exodus. Then there is the geography problem that scholars have quietly acknowledged for decades. According to the biblical account, the Israelites crossed the Red Sea and then traveled through a region called Midian before reaching the mountain of God. Here is what those same scholars know, but rarely discuss in public. Midian was never located in Egypt. Every ancient source places Midian east of the Gulf of Aqaba in what is now northwestern Saudi Arabia. The 1st century historian Josephus wrote that Midian was east of the Gulf of Aqaba within the Arabian Peninsula. The 2nd century geographer Ptolemy placed it at the head of the Gulf of Aqaba, adjacent to northwest Arabia. Even St. Jerome in the 4th century wrote that Mount Sinai lies in the land of Midian. So how did we end up worshipping at the wrong mountain for 1500 years? The answer involves politics and power and one very influential monastery. In the 4th century, Christianity had just become legal in the Roman Empire. Pilgrimage became an obsession among believers who wanted to see the places described in Scripture with their own eyes. When a small group of monks settled beneath a mountain in Egypt and declared that it was Sinai, nobody questioned their claim. Emperor Justinian built a fortress monastery to make the identification official. The site accumulated wealth and influence and political protection. Challenging this tradition meant challenging 15 centuries of institutional authority. It meant challenging millions of devoted pilgrims and one of the oldest Christian organizations on earth. Scholars built their theories around the assumption that Jabal Musa was correct. They rewrote geography to fit their conclusions. They dismissed every contradiction. They refused to look anywhere else until a drone flew over Saudi Arabia and found what should have been there all along. evidence carved in stone. The underground chambers were just the beginning. When researchers examined the reports from those who had managed to visit Jabal al-Lawz before the restrictions, they discovered surface evidence that matches the biblical account with disturbing precision. Geologists who analyzed rock samples from the summit found evidence of thermal metamorphism. The stone had been altered by temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius. That is hotter than flowing lava. That is the kind of extreme heat you would expect from a catastrophic fire or an explosive event of almost unimaginable scale. Exodus chapter 19 describes exactly this phenomenon. The mountain burned with fire. Smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace. The whole mountain quaked greatly. The blackened summit of Jabal Makla fits that description perfectly. Now, move down to the base of the mountain. The explorers discovered a massive boulder standing 50 to 60 feet tall that has been split cleanly down the middle. The crack runs straight through the rock and measures approximately 20 inches wide. A person can actually stand inside the gap. The ground around this split rock shows heavy erosion patterns. Water erosion in one of the driest regions on the entire planet Earth. The Bible describes Moses striking a rock and water pouring out in quantities sufficient to satisfy millions of people and all of their livestock. The split boulder at Jabal al-Lawz matches that story. The erosion patterns suggest a massive sudden flow of water that happened once and dramatically, and then stopped. Near the base of the mountain, researchers found a large stone platform made of deliberately cut and stacked stones. The dimensions match descriptions of altars used in ancient Israelite worship. Around this platform, they discovered burnt animal bones. Chemical analysis dated some of these bones to the Late Bronze Age, which is the exact historical period when the Exodus would have occurred according to biblical chronology. But perhaps the most controversial discovery was the rock art. Carved into stones near the site are images of cattle with curved horns. Several of these carvings show human figures bowing before the animals in what appears to be worship. This matches the story of the golden calf with remarkable precision. While Moses was on the mountain receiving the commandments, the Israelites grew impatient and fashioned an idol to worship. The rock art at Jabal al-Lawz suggests that someone recorded this event in stone, someone who was actually there. And then there are the boundary markers. Exodus chapter 19 warns the people not to touch the mountain or they will die. Moses established boundaries to keep them back from the holy ground. At Jabal al-Lawz, researchers found long lines of stones encircling the base of the peak. Then comes the vault beneath the mountain. Now we enter territory that will sound like speculation to some and prophecy to others. Because there are researchers who believe those buried chambers might contain something far more significant than ancient pottery and camping equipment, they believe the Ark of the Covenant could be sealed beneath that mountain. Follow the logic carefully. The Ark was constructed at Mount Sinai according to precise specifications recorded in Exodus chapter 25. A chest of acacia wood measuring approximately 3 feet 9 inches long and 2 feet 3 inches in both width and height. The entire structure was overlaid with pure gold inside and out. 2 golden cherubim sat on the lid with their wings spread upward. Inside the Ark rested the stone tablets bearing the 10 Commandments, along with a golden jar of manna and the rod of Aaron that had miraculously budded with flowers. The Ark traveled with the Israelites for centuries. It led them across the Jordan River into the Promised Land. It was housed in the tabernacle at Shiloh for 300 years. King David brought it to Jerusalem, and his son Solomon placed it in the Holy of Holies within the Great Temple. And then it vanished from history. The last definitive reference to the Ark appears in 2 Chronicles chapter 35 around 622 BC. When the Babylonians destroyed the temple in 586 BC, the Ark was already gone. There is no record of its capture, no mention of its destruction. It simply disappeared. For 2,000 years, people have searched for it. Theories place it in Ethiopia, hidden in a church that allows no visitors. Some believe it rests beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Others claim it was taken to Egypt and sealed in a secret tomb. But what if the Ark never left the place where it was created? Consider the situation carefully. The kingdom of Israel was collapsing. Enemies surrounded them on every side. The priests, responsible for protecting the most sacred object in their religion, needed to hide it somewhere that invaders would never think to look. They would not take it to Egypt. Egypt was the ancient enemy. They would not leave it in a city that would surely fall to Babylonian armies. They would take it to the one place on earth that no enemy would ever dare to defile. the mountain of God. Mount Sinai was sacred ground, protected by hundreds of miles of empty wilderness. If the priests carried the ark back to its place of origin and sealed it in a hidden chamber beneath the mountain, it would remain safe until the proper time for its rediscovery. The radar detected sealed rectangular chambers cut into solid rock. If those chambers were constructed to protect something precious, then the presence of the ark is not impossible. It is not even improbable. Here is something that most people completely miss, and it changes everything about how we should understand this discovery. The sacred memory. The Bible suggests that Mount Sinai was already considered holy ground before Moses ever set foot on it. In Exodus chapter 3, when Moses first encounters the burning bush, God tells him to remove his sandals because the place where he stands is holy. Not that it will become holy through this encounter. The ground already possesses that sacred quality. This single detail carries enormous implications. Moses did not stumble upon some random unknown peak in the wilderness. He was drawn to a place that already carried deep spiritual significance. Moses had been living among the Midianite people for 40 years before the burning bush incident. He married a Midianite woman named Zipporah. Her father, Jethro, was a Midianite priest. Moses spent 4 decades immersed in Midianite culture and religious traditions. Archaeological surveys around Jabal al-Lawz have discovered extensive evidence of Midianite civilization. Researchers have uncovered distinctive pottery decorated with geometric patterns and images of animals. They have found copper smelting sites where Midianite metalworkers processed ore from nearby mines. They have mapped evidence of sophisticated trade networks connecting this region to Egypt and beyond. The Midianites were not primitive wanderers. They were a complex civilization with established territories and advanced technical knowledge and religious practices stretching back generations. They knew every peak in their landscape. They would have assigned spiritual meaning to any mountain that displayed unusual characteristics. A blackened summit rising above tan and grey neighbours would have demanded explanation. A split boulder showing evidence of water in a waterless desert would have inspired sacred stories. The Midianites developed traditions around these features long before any Israelite arrived. The Bedouin tribes who live near Jabal al-Lawz today have preserved these traditions through thousands of years of unbroken memory. Generation after generation, fathers have told sons and mothers have told daughters about the mountain of Moses and the place where fire descended from heaven. Western academics dismissed these oral traditions for centuries. They called them folklore and superstition. They assumed that university-trained scholars with advanced degrees knew more about this landscape than the people who had lived there, since the events actually occurred. But now, the radar is confirming what the local people have said all along. The Bedouin were right. The academics were wrong. The mountain is real. The chambers are real. The sacred memory preserved by generations of desert dwellers turns out to be the most accurate historical record we possess. Do you believe the real Mount Sinai has been hidden from us this entire time? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.